live stream. I am coming to you live from Tampa, Florida. That's right, my home where I am now located, as you all know, where the podcast is hosted and produced. So guess what? This week is Farm Week, everyone. And I've seen National Farm Day, Ag Day. Well, guess what? We have a week now dedicated to the National Farm Workers, okay? Actually, I would say farm workers all over the globe are being recognized this week. Listen, we have a great guest today. We are live streaming. That's right. If you're checking us out right now, check us out on YouTube and or Facebook, the Produce Industry Show or Produce Industry Podcast, to get a better view of what we are doing and watch this entire interview. We also will take Q&A, some questions, and give some answers during this. So please type on YouTube or Facebook some of your questions, what you want to know about Farm Week, and we will answer those live with our guests. Now, today, as I always say, when we start live stream, I got my paper. I'm like a reporter, everyone. I have notes on what we're going to go over. The fun thing you don't get to see when I am on the podcast and not on video, the things I do behind scenes, like also eat an orange, okay? I will be doing this on screen. So let's talk about who we have this week from Farm Week Live. Okay, everyone. Now we have EFI, the Equitable Food Initiative. We have a great gentleman on the line today that's going to talk to us about Farm Week Live. But let me just give you a quick note about who these people are. This group that's doing amazing things in the produce and supply chain industry. Equitable Food Initiative, the workforce development and certification organization that partners with growers, farm workers, retailers, consumers, advocacy groups, is celebrating National Farmers Awareness Week. Listen, they're encouraging growers, ag associations, and consumers to share the message of what they're doing, not just today, but every single day in the produce and supply chain industry, especially when it comes to farming. So let's talk a little bit about our guest, okay? He is a gentleman of well-rounded nature. We're going to have a couple cool questions and conversations about his journey and maybe bring up a little bit about mine. We have the executive director, Peter O'Driscoll's of the Equitable Food Initiative. Now, remember, this is a nonprofit organization, but guess what? He is a nonprofit skill-building leader, everyone. He works with major buyers, stakeholders, workers, groups to provide great awareness, assurance, and regarding the supply chain while generating measurable value for all of its stakeholders. I am telling you, when I first looked at Peter and looked at how he's been servicing the entire industry and really building development, building organizations around hunger, poverty, human rights, this guy's background really got me excited, as you can tell. I'm sitting here going, wait a minute, there's some more that I get to learn. And that's really what we're here to do, is we're here to talk about learning, education, and dropping some knowledge on everybody here in the produce and supply chain industry and beyond. So let's get Peter O'Driscoll on the line today, and let's get Farm Week really ended and kicked off at the same time. Peter.
Hey, good morning. How you doing, Patrick?
Fantastic. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Very glad to be here with you.
Now, look, when we talked about this with the marketing group, I would say it was a little bit over a month ago. They reached out and wanted to do a podcast, Peter. They were like, let's do a podcast during Farm Week awareness. And it's crazy because a lot of times the podcasts are done a couple weeks in advance. I know we don't want to hear that, right? That they're pre-recorded. We want to make sure they're always live. But listen, everybody, we have schedules, we have deadlines, we have deliverables. So we got to make sure that that happens. And I thought to myself, let's do this live. Why don't we add another segment to March? It's sponsorship month during March. Heck, it's Viva Fresh this week in Dallas, Texas. And I thought this would be a great idea to have you on board today. Talk a little bit about the Equitable Food Initiative. Talk about, a little bit about your background and really why we're celebrating Farm Week, why we're celebrating, people who pick these beautiful oranges or, deliver these beautiful pieces of fruit to the store. So the first thing, because we didn't talk about it in the beginning like we do our normal podcast, give us a good 30,000 foot overview of the Equitable Food Initiative and yourself, please.
Great. Thanks so much. Well, let's start with Equitable Food Initiative because that's the most important thing. We're a nonprofit, as you mentioned, but we're a skill building and a certification program for the fresh produce industry. And what that means is we recognize that consumers and customers want assurance around social responsibility. They want assurance around food safety. They want assurance around sustainability and things like integrated pest management. So what EFI does is we bring all of those elements together in a single certification because we recognize there's a relationship between worker welfare and food safety and integrated pest management. We bring them together in a single certification, and we built that certification by looking all through the supply chain, right? For this to work, it's got to work for workers, it's got to work for growers and producers, it's got to work for the retail customer, and it's got to work for those consumers as well. So we've brought that all together in a multi-stakeholder organization, and our goal is to build assurance and to build awareness of this very complex and very important supply chain in fresh produce.
Listen, I was going to ask a question of why, right? Just to tee it up at that point, right, Peter? But listen, I'm in the produce and supply chain industry. I have my background comes very extensive from the farm world, and I definitely understand that why is Farm Worker Awareness Week so important. But let's talk about that. I mean, let's tell some of these consumers out there that are listening. People in our industry know, but maybe a buyer who just got out of college and is working at one of the large retailers or wholesalers, does he really know what it's put into it? Does she really understand it? So farm worker awareness, why the heck is this so important? I mean, people are probably asking this.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you what, you and I were chatting before, and we both have some experience in what it actually takes to harvest fresh fruits and vegetables, right? It is not at all an easy job. It is hard work. It is hot work. It is heavy work, right? And yet, if folks weren't willing to do that kind of work, consumers would not get to enjoy the incredible range of fruits and vegetables, as you mentioned in the beginning, from around the world, right? We are incredibly lucky to have that. So Farm Worker Awareness Week is very, very important to help people understand what goes into that fresh produce supply chain and really where it starts, right? It starts on the farm with those women and men who are willing to do that hard work. And I think in looking at Farm Worker Awareness Week, I think most folks who've ever tried to go out and even work in the garden for a couple of hours can understand why it's hard work. But I think for us, we want to make a point. It is skilled work as well, right?
100%.
If you understand, if you understand the produce supply chain, you know that every buyer has their own spec around size and color and quality and so forth. Workers have to know when they're picking who they're picking for. And increasingly in this day and age, because appropriately, there's a lot of focus on things like food safety and pesticide use and everything else. They have to understand as well, where are those pathogen risks and how do they harvest in a way that minimizes the likelihood of a foodborne illness or a contamination event. So this is hard work, but it's also really skilled work. And we want folks to understand that.
You got to use your brain. You know, one thing I'm going to bring up, and let's talk raisins for a second. You know, that's a big one because, you know, if you know anything about raisins, how they're procured, you literally pick the fruit off the vine. You're putting them on this type of mat on the ground. There's sand everywhere. There could be rodents going through the groves. And I just remember at one point thinking when they were walking the groves, they were talking about bird droppings, and that was a really key thing to say. Listen, if there's bird dropping, this now contaminates this entire lot. We can't bring it in. And it's so funny because if you're to go back, you know, even if you go back to 2005, right around that area, I don't think a lot of these concerns were happening, right? I think that it got picked up around 2007 and 2009 when that melon case happened. I think you remember that melon case. I always say I never want to mention the names. We all know who it is. I think really that kicked it into gear, and it was just like, oh my gosh, like, what are we doing in the field? And then I remember you'd go talk to anybody about food safety, quality, water, and they'd be like, oh, we're busy. We don't have time to talk about this kind of stuff. It doesn't produce any ROI. It doesn't produce anything for us, right? And then now it's all about that. It's about having your food fresh, You want it to be to the table, but you want it being safe. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Heck, I just peeled a tangerine just a few seconds ago, and look how easy that was just to peel a tangerine. Do you realize, and I know you do, Peter, but to everybody listening, to get this, grown is a lot of work. To get it picked is a lot of work. A lot of tangerines, heck, in California and Florida, people still go up and clip them right off the tree, right? Tangerines. Have you ever seen the stem and leaf tangerine, right? I mean, these are things that, listen, I don't care what anybody says. I've been yelled at for picking an orange off the tree the wrong way, Peter. There is a certain way to grow. You grab, twist, pick, and not the whole branch coming at you, right? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But actually, that thing comes off so clean to where you've got pickers that are literally just going and they're filling up 750-pound bins in hours. You know what I mean?
So I do. Well, folks need to understand, as you say, not only that that's skilled work, because there's a right way and a wrong way to do it, and how you do it influences how much productivity you're going to get out of each tree or, each lot. But the other thing is, I'm really glad you brought up that bird dropping issue or animal waste or all these other things that actually can cause multi-million-dollar recalls in the industry, right? And interrupt those supply chains and require product to be pulled off shelves, right? And the best way to prevent that is to have a worker who's skilled, who understands the relationship, for example, between animal waste or fungal infestation or any of those other things, so that adding to the skills that they already bring into this harvesting job, they're also your best monitors for protecting food safety, for implementing protocols that reduce the likelihood of pathogen transmission. So I think Equitable Food Initiative, we like to think that we're pretty unique in the industry because we recognize the linkage between that worker skill, that worker understanding on the one hand, and then the urgency really of food safety and of pathogen prevention. We bring those together in our program.
Yeah, it's very important too. I mean, I think that everybody within the food and supply chain industry needs to understand, or if they do already, it's just another added layer to your business model now. I was talking to a couple of people with the Global Food Safety Initiative, GFSI, earlier in the year. And that's it. It's like we now have changed to talking about, everybody wants to know what the ROI is on every single department. And in some departments, you got to realize, no, these are your investments towards your business, right? I mean, these are key things that you have to understand. They're investments in your business that are going to help your business succeed and not get sued. I mean, let's be real. I mean, I hate to say it like that, but we want less problems. So when we can get the food to your table, it's that fresh, fast, and safe. We can get it there fresh, we can get it there fast, but we're going to get it there safe. And that's the main goal. So talking about farm worker recognition, heck, I've been a part of California Citrus Mutual. I'm part of United Fresh Produce Association. I have lobbied for everything for, putting the Gatorade coolers in the fields to, obviously making sure they've got the tent covers, right? Another problem that grower packers were like, oh, that's going to cost us more money. But how is this farm worker recognition changing? I mean, I know, how is it different through EFI companies?
Sure. Well, you mentioned a number of the protections that workers need in a hot and sometimes unsafe environment, right, to make sure that they're safe in doing their jobs. So the way I think it's evolved is there's an increasing realization. The produce industry came out in 2018 with the Ethical Charter for Responsible Labor Practices, right, co-sponsored by PMA and the United Fresh Produce Association, in recognition of the fact that it was really, really important to shine a bright light on the basic safety and healthy working conditions that workers need. So EFI has taken that. We like to think we have the most rigorous labor standards in the industry. We connect those to rigorous food safety standards and so forth. And our take on it is that there's a growing awareness not only in the produce industry but in the consumer environment as well. And I think you probably are familiar. There's some research out from the Hartman Group around consumer concern around labor conditions in the supply chain. And we're coming out of a year now of COVID where everybody celebrated these essential workers, right? Up and down the food supply chain because they could still buy foods in the middle of a pandemic. But I think we've got to build on that. We got to recognize that farm workers aren't just essential during a pandemic, right? They're essential all the time. And that we have to make sure that their working conditions are healthy and dignified the same way everybody else's should be.
It's so true. I mean, I talk about that with everybody, not just in the food supply chain. I think with our background, we've always been involved in that. But I do remember being able to walk into a packing house and not have anything on and just grab an orange right off the line,
Yeah,
peel it open, and eat it. And that's a big no-no today. And
that's right.
and it's okay. And it's okay with me though, right? Because
Yeah,
why should I be able to do it just because I'm the owner's son, right? No one
right.
else was actually technically allowed to do that to begin with, Peter. They just allowed
Yeah,
it to happen because I was either the buyer or it was, yeah, right. My dad owned the business. Let's be real
that's right.
here. You took some of those powers and took it to the next level. But I think COVID did shine a light on essential workers. But I want to go back to the what you said was, listen, every worker to me, I believe, is an essential worker. We are like a food ecosystem. Compare it to that. It's the circle of life. The hyenas have a place, the lions have a place, we all have a place. So, regardless what you do, even if you are picking oranges in the field or ringing up the oranges at the cash register, every single piece of the supply chain is important. Your job is important because guess what? That's what makes our globe, our nation so great, is that we all can connect this big circle of life, right? And we know that. So I think COVID did shine a light on some of those essential workers, right? And I think that really there's been some help on that. But you're right. I think that COVID has just shined it, and we're here to now look at these farm workers like, oh my gosh, like holy crap, like I can't believe these people pick this many oranges. I can't believe that some of these people get paid below minimum wage, right? But they're on piece rate or they're on these different programs to where if they pick fast enough, they can make up to $70 an hour, right? It's like they can make a lot of money if they do it the right way. And then if not, you can obviously make the same amount of money. I almost compare it to like Uber sometimes. If people Uber drive, they choose when they drive. They can choose their earnings technically. It depends on how hard and smart you work.
That's right. Well, I want to go back to something else you said, though, right? Which is that sometimes, when folks look at what does it take to really make sure they have good and safe working conditions, too much of the time, folks see that as a cost, right? They see that as a additional cost in their cost of goods. We really want to awaken folks' understanding of the fact that investment in essential workers is actually around investing in your company's business performance, right? This is not just about doing the bare minimum around assurance on social responsibility or assurance on food safety. The more you invest in your workforce, the better trained they are, the more productive you're going to be as a company. And so when we look at thanking these essential workers, right, for the hard work they do in the middle of a pandemic, we also want to shine a bright light on the skills they already have and the need to build those skills going forward, because I think you're very familiar with this reality. In agriculture in the United States, we're facing a labor shortage, right? 68% of growers reported, and this last year,
Wow.
that they had trouble finding both domestic workers and H-2A workers. So our industry, right, which is so important for bringing that fresh, safe, healthy fruit and vegetable to consumer tables, is going to have to ask itself really hard questions about how we're going to sustain continuity of supply over the next 5 to 10 years as that workforce shrinks, right? The workforce is aging. And at the same time, we're seeing lots of things like agricultural technology and innovation and new investments in that area. We need to make sure that workforce is ready to interface with the kind of new ag tech and data environment that's coming down the pike. And so Farm Worker Awareness Week is a great chance not just to focus on the hard work, but to focus on the need for continuing this work into the future, and therefore the need for investment in building the skills of that workforce to be ready for the industry in the 21st century. We're going to need to get more fruit and veg out of the fields with fewer workers. We're going to have to work smarter.
One 100%. And what's funny is that like going back, like I think training programs have completely changed nowadays too, though. I think that before Peter, like when I started working at Laboo's, I know you're gonna smile, but it's like they had the VHS tapes. I
Right.
stuck the VHS tapes in, and I remember I was probably on like, man, I think the first week, Peter, I watched probably 7 to 8 hours of videos on, what the functions of the packing house are, what your function is in your role and your title. And I think we've gone away from a lot of that. I think companies really have, because now it's like they bring people on board and they're like, okay, jump into our company culture. Here you go. And then if you don't fit in, you don't fit in. But I think training is very key. Maddie Fisher made a comment on YouTube. Thank you, Maddie. She said, totally agree. Essential workers are absolutely essential, and everyone needs to be made aware. That is so true, right? We got to understand what's happening in the fields, everyone. Even on our YouTube channel, we posted, we did a Florida citrus packing house, tour of the packing house. And we got to get a lot of good feedback because people love seeing that. One person commented, Peter, and was like, I could listen to those belts run all day long and just watching, citrus just going across the belt. It gives them almost a sense of pride, like for them, even when they get this orange, they're like, I know where that came from. I know exactly where this piece of fruit came from, right?
Well, you look at this industry and it's really miraculous, right? How this industry is able to provide so much good and healthy food to so many folks, right? But that could not happen, right? Think about that chain you just described, all the folks who are working that production belt, all the folks who are sorting and doing quality control, right? And then all the folks who picked the oranges before they even got to that belt. So the more the consumer really understands the supply chain, right? All the different steps,
Correct.
all the skills and the investments that are required at every step of the way, then I think the more we're going to appreciate and respect the folks who bring this product to us. And that's really the focus on Farmworker Awareness Week.
I agree with you. And then here we go. So EFI, obviously you find ways to help your labor. You find ways to really help them get to the skilled, I would say not farm workers or the skilled labor that you need for our growth. But how is that different than anybody else that's out there, any other organizations?
Well, there's plenty of organizations, right? We're not a labor recruiter. We don't provide the labor. What we do, you just told an interesting story about somebody giving you a VHS tape and telling you to watch a few hours for training. I wouldn't ask anybody to come to me, Peter O'Driscoll, for training on how to run their citrus facility or how to pick strawberries, right? The folks who really know that are the workers and managers on the farm. What EFI really brings out is the skills, the experience, and the knowledge of the folks themselves, the workers and the managers. EFI really is a culture change system for building new kinds of relationships around collaboration, conflict resolution, problem solving, continuous improvement between labor and management so that they can find the solutions that work for them in their environment to address some of these concerns, whether it be around labor, whether it be around food safety or integrated pest management. So we don't come in as experts telling you what to do with 25 books about food safety and agriculture. We come in there with a system for figuring out how folks can work together, and particularly in an industry that's had a lot of conflict over the years, right, between labor and management. We build off labor management collaboration. Labor and management need each other. We help them figure out how to work together. We give them the skills that they need to solve problems together so that they can meet our standards, but increasingly, not just meet our standards and get certified EFI, but to figure out how labor and management can collaborate on business solutions as well. And I say again, in a tight labor market, right, where there aren't enough workers and managers are going to have to work together really effectively to continue to get the job done to meet consumer demand and customer requirement.
Oh, man, that's fantastic. And I think that, even for me, I mean, this is a lot of new knowledge for me. It's interesting to hear what you guys do. Again, what I love about the podcast and the Produce Industry Show is that we're finding so much people that are in the produce and supply chain that I never knew were here before. And I know it sounds crazy, but it's so true. I mean, there's how many companies that are in the produce and supply chain and industry that are making a difference, but sometimes we only hear from the big ones. We only hear from the big boys sometimes, right? All the big brands and everything like that. So I know that there's a lot coming out. I know we have, I know I just signed off on the Farm Workers Modernization Act with United Fresh because obviously going back to our farm, our packing house, these are things that we're very interested in. We got to understand it. We got to make sure that we're in the right boat. I understand, and talking to United Fresh, that this is the time where the president was getting ready. He was going to sign this, so we had to act quick and know that the produce industry was behind this. And I know that it did get passed, and now it's our job as the industry to really start working on it and perfecting the things that are in this bill.
That's right. And the other great thing about the Farm Workforce Modernization Act is that really the whole industry came together around it to support it, right? On the labor side as well as on the producer side. And I think that's the model that we need to continue to build on going forward, right? Everybody recognizes this labor shortage is serious. Everybody recognizes that the need to not just create decent, fair, safe working conditions for workers, but to make sure there's an adequate supply of workers is really important. So that's where the act is, I think, particularly important. But it's also, as I say, a model for how we can get more done by collaboration.
Yeah, and that's what I learned about it. At first, I'm always sketchy on signing things, Peter. Right, especially because you know how it is with legislation. You could sign something today, and in 8 years, when a new legislation or a new president comes, it could be like, "Why did you sign that?" Right? You know what I mean? Trust me, we've seen it happen, and that's why. But when I came across this, it was like, listen, this is something that we can get in front of, and the industry is really the ones getting behind it. You know what I mean? It's not like there was a senator or a judge or a lawyer that said this is what we're trying to do. This is really the industry put this together and is standing behind it. So I think that's very cool. And I think that's obviously shows a big part of the industry working together, like you just said. So based on that, I'm going to ask you one more question because we are almost out of time, and we want to make sure that everybody knows where to reach out and find you at. But if we look at amazing success between within this industry, we look at how we develop and really standardize success. As you know this very much, there's not a lot of kudos in the produce industry, right? We're more putting out fires all the time. So what would you say? What's one of the best success stories you have for us?
Well, I could go one direction. I could talk about how great it is to see some of the major buyers and the major produce industry organizations coming together around this idea of improving labor rights. But I'm going to take it really, really down to the field level for you. And I'm going to put it in the context of the Me Too movement, right? We've been hearing a lot over the last few years around sexual harassment and problems like that all through our society. It's a big issue in agriculture as well, in the fields. And sexual harassment is endemic. You can read a bunch of reports over the last few years around how women workers suffer in this industry, right, at the hands of some of the men in the industry. So, yeah, Equitable Food Initiative, part of our stand is zero tolerance for sexual harassment. Our training creates these worker manager teams whose job it is to figure out where it's happening, to eradicate it. We make sure that there's a point of contact, a man and a woman on these worker manager teams on every farm we certify, where workers can come forward with this issue if they're experiencing harassment. And as a result, Berkeley Food Institute took a look at our programs and saw a dramatic decline in sexual harassment on the farm. So I want to tell you, that's a huge success if you're a woman farm worker, right? But let me also tell you this, and this is really, really important, right, in this collaboration framework. Eradicating sexual harassment, for example, is not just a matter of doing the right thing, because it is the right thing. It's also a matter of helping companies perform better. So I want to tell you the story of the strawberry operation in Watsonville, California. Shout out here to Andrew Williamson Fresh Produce, where by eradicating sexual harassment in their operation, they were actually able to attract more women workers, right? Folks were willing to bring their wives, their aunts, their daughters to work with them in the fields because it was a safe place for women to work. And that's a really good example to me of the collaborative culture that we're trying to build, right? We want to raise the bar on working conditions. We want to make sure that everybody's respecting the ethical charter and responsible labor practices. But we want to do it in a way that actually makes companies better. And if we can help companies solve their recruitment and retention problems by eradicating a problem like sexual harassment, then there's a win-win opportunity that we really want to encourage the industry to seize in all kinds of different areas.
Yeah, you dropped out on me. I wasn't even thinking you were going to bring up sexual harassment. I think that's fantastic. I think you're right. I think with a lot of women leaders getting up into the industry now, I think that's been a really big case back in the days, right? I say back in the days because, through my career, I have seen it, but I haven't seen it as much in the last probably 10 years than I did probably between 2000 and 2010, right? And trust me, this is all real things that are happening, right? So I think that's insane to say. If we were able to drop the percentage of sexual harassment, would you feel that you were to come to work in a better working environment? Oh my gosh, yes, a woman would be like 100%, because we do know that is on the mind, and it's happened in our industry, whether it's in the field, right, or right down to the buyer's desk or up into leadership. It happens every single day. I think that is a heck of a success story, Peter. Heck of a success story. So I think that's fantastic. We have another comment. I'll pop it up on the screen. But Maddie Fisher says, wow, that is great. Thank you for all that you do, Peter. And thank you to all the farmers. I will do more to educate myself and others about all that goes into farming. I mean, that's a fantastic statement even then. Now, that is Maddie Fisher from John Green Logistics. John Green Logistics is a sponsor of the podcast and the show. But again, we all just know what we know, right? So this education has been fantastic for the last 29 minutes. And Peter, I always ask our guests before they get off the line is, if someone wanted to reach out to you, want to get a hold of the Equitable Food Initiative, how can they go about doing that?
Sure. The best and quickest and easiest way is to come to our website, www.equitablefood.org, and you'll find all of the links there to our wonderful social media channels. You'll find ways to get in touch with us, but love it if you would come visit us at equitablefood.org.
Awesome. And Peter, it was great to have you today during Farm Week. It was great that you were our third live stream interview on Restream. So just hold on for a quick moment and we will get back to you in just a second while we close out the live stream. Well, everybody, another great week here at the Produce Industry Show and the Produce Industry Podcast. We had Peter O'Driscoll from Equitable Food Initiative, and I can tell you that I have learned a tremendous amount today just about really what companies and organizations are doing in the produce and supply chain industry. So I want to thank him for coming on the line and thank Full Tilt Marketing for putting this together during this week of Farm Week Live, Viva Fresh, and more. So everyone, thank you so much. I also want to give a huge shout out to all of our sponsors here at the Produce Industry Podcast and the Produce Industry Show. Thank you so much for being involved. Terra Exports, Flavor Wave Fresh, Ag Tools, John Green Logistics, United Fresh Produce Association, and Indianapolis Fruit Company. You guys are stellar, dynamite sponsors that we love to see every day in and out. And also, I want to thank everybody who has been subscribing to the Produce Industry Show on YouTube, because guess what? We are now over, I'm going to check it live so we can get the accurate number of how many subscribers we have. We are now at 565 subscribers, everyone. Help us get to the 1,000 subscribers. Help our channel grow and have more education in the produce and supply chain industry. And until next time, we'll see you in the fields and on the horizon.